Alright, welcome back to my channel. In this video today, we will be discussing three main things: MVC, choosing between Flask and Django, and how MVC relates to popular backend languages. So let's start with MVC. It stands for Model, View, and Controller. It is a software architectural pattern that separates an application into three interconnected parts. Model, which represents the data and the business logic of the application. It gets to manage the data and performs calculations. It interacts directly with the database. Now, the view is responsible for the visual representation of that data. It displays the information for the user and allows them to interact with our application. Think of the user interface. Finally, the controller handles the user's input, updates the model, and selects the appropriate view to display. It acts like the intermediary between the model and the view. Now, why do we care about MVC? First, it improves maintainability by separating concerns so that the MVC can make our code easier to understand, also make it easy to test and modify. Number two, it enhances the reusability. Think about those components that can be reused in different parts of your application or in other projects altogether. Number three, it's better for scalability. With MVC, you can handle increasingly complex situations and grow your user base. Number four, faster development because different teams get to work on different models, different views, and different controller components simultaneously. And number five, it improves testability. Unit testing becomes a breeze because components are isolated. You can easily test them. Now, before we get to the end of this video, we'll get to talk about how MVC relates to the popular programming languages for the backend. But understand that frameworks like Django for Python, Laravel for PHP, and Express.js for JavaScript or Node.js, they do follow this MVC pattern, which makes it easier for them to build well-structured and maintainable web applications. Now, armed with this knowledge and others, let's try to choose between Flask and Django for our particular projects. Flask, which we've seen in previous tutorials, offers flexibility and control over our development process. It is very lightweight and ideal for small projects and APIs. Its learning curve is just like Python, but it has less built-in functionality. If you need features like authentication, database interactions, and templating, then you have to do it yourself or use some third-party libraries like we did earlier. But Django is a full-featured framework. It provides a comprehensive set of tools and libraries for building a strong web application. It also enhances rapid development because it offers a high level of abstraction and built-in features. The learning curve, once more, is similar to Python, but it gets very heavyweight and may be very much overkill for small projects per se. Now, when do you get to choose Flask over Django? If you have a small scale project for simple web apps like the one we just did, or you have microservices for building smaller independent services, Or maybe customizability is important to you when you want to actually need fine-grained control over your application's behavior, then you should go with Flask. But if you have a large-scale project for complex web apps with many features and you need rapid prototyping for quickly building a functional prototype, or if security is primary because Django provides built-in security features to protect against common web vulnerabilities and cyber attacks, and then I would suggest heavily that you should look towards Django. At the end of the day though, the best choice depends on your project specific needs, your team skills, and your preferences per se. Always remember to think about factors like the project size, complexity, how much time you have for development, your team's expertise, and also maintainability in future. Now, back to MVC and its relationship with these popular web backend programming languages. As we've just talked about Python, Django, and Flask, Django per se actually is a high-level framework that strongly adheres to MVC pattern, but Flask, as we mentioned, is more flexible and allows for a more customized MVC implementation. If you're going to use Flask, then you can structure your application to follow the MVC pattern or adopt a more minimalist approach. JavaScript, on the other hand, has Node.js, which itself does not really enforce MVC pattern, but the frameworks that are built on top of Node.js actually do. Think about Express.js, which is a popular framework that can be used to implement MVC. There's also Next.js, which is another framework that combines server-side rendering, SSR, and client-side rendering, CSR, and often uses a more component-based approach. JavaScript also has front-end frameworks, which we discussed in a previous tutorial. For instance, React and Vue.js, they all use component-based architecture that can be seen as a variation of MVC. A component actually encapsulates both the view and the controller aspects, while the model is often managed in a separate state. PHP, the most popular backend language, uses frameworks as well. For instance, Laravel, which is a popular PHP framework, follows the MVC pattern. CodeIgniter is another PHP framework which is lightweight, and it can be used to implement MVC, but it is more flexible and allows for a more customized approach as well. To recap, all in all, MVC provides a structured approach to building web applications, promoting code organization, maintainability, and testability. We have many frameworks like Django and Laravel that strictly adhere to MVC, while others like Flask and Express.js offer a more flexible approach. Understanding MVC principles will definitely help us in our approach to build robust and scalable web applications, regardless of which programming language we choose or whichever framework we decide to go with. Thank you for watching this wonderful video. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below, and please do not forget, like, share, and subscribe for more tech tutorials and insights with Vitus DK, and you already know.